All right, we can go ahead and get started. Again, appreciate you guys joining in today. These sessions are um, progressing really nicely over the course of the last month or so. We've covered a lot of topics on growth and how to use your data, and we're kind of expanding more into reconciliation and making sure that you, business owners, or those in the accounting teams or bookkeeping teams, feel empowered by the tools that you use to make decisions for growth and decisions that ultimately help the business going forward. So, just to introduce today's topic, we are talking about the 30-minute monthly close, and why it matters so much, why it changes everything, why it makes your business run so much more smoothly. My name, if you haven't been introduced to me already, my name is John May. I am the video engagement manager here for Webgility. Been here for about 5 years or so. I've worked in sales and marketing for a long time in the past. So I'm happy to dive into these data-driven decisions and exactly how you can get to that point in your business. So as always with these sessions, if you've never attended these, I like to start off with just like a couple slide preamble where we just talk through the overall concept. And it helps give context to the whiteboard before I dive in and start drawing all over a whiteboard. So, without further ado, just to start things off, I wanted to take a couple seconds to talk about what the norm is in reconciliation. This doesn't necessarily specifically apply to e-commerce, but just accounting and reconciliation in general. You'll see three numbers here. 6 or more days is what half of businesses take to get fully reconciled at the end of the month. This data, and you'll see this referenced if you're looking at like, bookkeeping resources or accounting resources. A lot of people, CPAs reference this statistic. It comes directly from the American Productivity and Quality Center study that was done on about 2,300 businesses, I want to say. And it found that, yeah, most businesses, or 53% of businesses, take longer than 6 days to reconcile at the end of the month each month, which is huge. That's a lot of time to take. And we'll kind of talk about why that's such a big deal. But to go further down the line, most teams aim for 3 days. And I think that's a realistic, sort of goal for a lot of people, especially if you have complex workflows, you're still using spreadsheets, or some of the more manual reconciliation tactics. But it's actually possible to get this done in 30 minutes. And this doesn't necessarily take into account the channel differences or complexity of certain workflows. It's just a different structure of working, a different structure of looking at reconciliation and making sure that you're set up for success. As we talk about in this session, and we've talked about this a number of times, most of what I do is sort of give you the information to prepare yourself for the future and make sure that you are, getting ahead of the curve, so to speak. So, it's not a speed trick. It's just numbers that represent these different numbers that I've kind of set out here. They represent different relationships with your own financial data. So again, just to drive that point home, most of what we talk about is having a good relationship with your financial data and using it to your benefit rather than looking at it as sort of a burden or something you have to catch up on or crunch to make at the end of the month. So the timeline and sort of the reason that we're talking about this is when we talk about taking 6+ days to close or even 3+ days to close, you're looking at sort of a blind spot, right? So just to look at this very simplistic timeline here, month ends on March 31st. Your close doesn't happen until April 10th, possibly, depending on how long it takes you to actually close that book. And then your first real decision that you make from that financial data, restocking inventory, cutting back on certain products, any sort of, business centric decision that you're making off of that financial data is working off of those blind days. And it says 10 here because the example uses April 10th as the close date. But if it's 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, all of those are blind days. You're working off of data that was, if we're talking about March closing, you're working off of February's numbers because you had not closed March yet. So the speed of your close basically equates to the freshness of your decisions. If you can make your accounting process, your reconciliation process faster, that means that you're going to make better, more informed decisions quicker in your business, obviously, right? And so that's the whole framing of this sort of scenario is that by making your reconciliation process easier on yourself and your business, you're making those decisions easier on yourself as well and giving yourself more time to, you know, decide the right move or the next move for your business. So if you're, again, if you're working off of data from, March 31st close, that 10 days in between your month end and your actual close is data that is old. It's not a bookkeeping problem necessarily. It's just a strategy problem. It doesn't mean you're slow. It just means that there's some efficiencies that you could employ to make things easier for yourself. So here's the part where I switch over to my trusty whiteboard. So I've done something a little different this week. I've kind of cut it into zones to make it a little bit easier to follow. I know, when whiteboards get kind of crazy, it can be hard, especially if you're watching the replay back or you're going back and looking at the finished whiteboard as, the PDF that I exported as. It can be a little hard to follow. So, going at it a little bit differently this time. But what I wanted to start off with is the three breakdowns, and I'm going to actually label that here in the header. So we're going to call it the three breakdowns. And what I mean by that is the three things that cause your reconciliation to take longer, right? They're not random. They happen every single month. And they're things like payout mismatches from settlement timing, which we talked about last week. Fee aggregation from like hidden costs, which we also talked about last week, and refunds and returns that didn't flow through or get posted correctly, which we've talked about a number of times before. So let's go ahead and sort of map this out a little bit here. And we'll start with some medium text. Oops. Do that again. So this is going to be number one, payout mismatches. So payout mismatches, let's define what we mean here. And we'll go small text for this. And I keep getting rid of it. There we go. So what we mean by this is your bank deposit doesn't match the expected revenue, right? And that's what we talked about last week. When you see your bank deposit, maybe the settlement that you got doesn't necessarily match what's going into the bank because of things like fees, things that you didn't expect to show up in your bank deposit, or maybe you're expecting but don't see in the bank deposit or reflected there. You spend 2 to 4 hours hunting the gap, right? So you're trying to figure out what the gap is, where it came from. So you're spending time trying to find that gap. And it's generally settlement timing, right? So settlement timing, Amazon has a 14-day cycle, which means orders span 2 periods, right? So that's one thing that can sort of throw things out of whack from the get-go is your settlement timing, and just bank deposits not matching in general. So if there's additional complexities outside of settlement timing, that are coming from like your marketplaces or like places like Shopify, that definitely adds to the confusion. So the next breakdown, and I'm going to zoom in here and make it a little easier. The next breakdown we're going to call unreconciled fees. Okay, and generally what this means is, again, following the example that we talked about last week with payout settlements, or payout bank deposits, and understanding the fees that are inside of the actual settlement report. Amazon deposited $8,000. Oops. And you booked it as revenue, right? If you booked all that $8,000 from the payout as revenue, you're missing 3,000. And this is using sort of a similar example that I used last week. These numbers are pretty much exactly what I used last week. Missing $3,000 in fees. They are invisible, right? Because you don't know what the fees are attributing to in that bank deposit. It's just you're booking it all as revenue. So in turn, your P&L is going to show an incorrect margin, which we'll just list as 52%, right? Reality for margin is closer to 40%. So that 12-point difference makes a lot of difference, right? In planning for your business. So not knowing where your fees are coming from and how much to book in revenue is going to make decisions a lot harder, make it a lot harder for you to go back and reconcile. So you spend 2 to 4 hours hunting the gap on, payout mismatches. Unreconciled fees is probably about the same amount. If you don't know what the fees are and you're having to go track and try to correct it to make sure you're getting the clear and accurate margin, you're taking more time than you need, where you could have had it segmented from the beginning and made it a lot easier on yourself, right? So the last, we'll call it, breakdown is going to be misposted refunds, like we talked about. Misposted refunds. All right, and misposted refunds, customer returned an item, Shopify restocked it. Right? Super simple. But QuickBooks didn't reverse the COGS entry. Inventory is wrong. So if QuickBooks didn't reverse that entry, your inventory isn't going to be accurate for projections, right? And you're going to have to go and fix that, make sure the inventory is corrected. So your COGS is overstated and your margin is understated. So all these things add up to be lost time, time spent digging through your books to understand, where the money's going, where the fees are coming from, and how much money you're potentially losing, or how much you should be booking in revenue, which is all very, very important to know. So just to kind of point out where these things are found, so we'll say this is found at month end. Right? Your payout mismatch is found at month end. Your your unreconciled fees are also found at month end. And then your misposted refunds might be found never. You might never find those misreturned or misposted refunds inside your books, which means you're not getting a clear picture of your books ever at that point. But let's just say you do find them. These are all sort of month end triggers. And I'm going to make these all red just to drive my point home here because I think it's pretty important. Um, so like I said, these aren't things that happen at random. They're going to happen every single month if you don't have things set up correctly, if you're not segmenting your data properly, and they will compound, right? This is not just one instance that's happening. It's going to happen every single month. Or if you have, multiple Amazon payouts a month, which you should every 14, 15 days, it's going to happen multiple times a month. So that just, again, compounds the amount of time that you might be spending going back and fixing these sort of these errors, right? So my question to you in the audience, or if you're watching this replay back, would be which of these three breakdowns, as we're calling them, hits you the hardest, right? Drop if you're here in chat and you feel like sharing, drop it in chat, or just keep that in the back of your mind when you're talking about how to increase the efficiency of your close every single month, right? Because I want to know where the pain lives for the group. So again, if you do have that at the top of your mind, throw it in chat. Um, the next zone here that I'll kind of dive into is going to be a 5 minute check. So this is sort of the first step in making sure things get more efficient for you, which is just taking 5 minutes every Monday morning to sort of prepare for the week and make sure things are set up properly for you and your team, right? So the first thing that you want to do is I'll make this medium again. match payouts to, or watch, sorry, match settlements to deposits, or vice versa, however you want to look at it. So if they do match, move on, you're clean. And we'll make that green so we know it's good. If they don't match, flag it. Do not wait. Right. So just a simple thing that you can do if you can't match your deposit to a settlement. I'm just going to switch this because I think it makes more sense to swap it the other way around. But if you're matching your deposits to settlements and you can't find the match, make sure you flag it right that time, right at that moment. It will save you a lot of time in the long run, right? Seems pretty simple. I'd kind of liken it to, making your bed at the beginning of the day. It's something that, everybody gets taught. If you make it now, you don't have to make it later. It sort of sets the tone for the rest of the day as well. The second step here, or the second part of the checklist, would be clear unmatched oops, unmatched transactions in QB. Simple, right? So if it's clean, nothing older than 7 days, right? So you want to have nothing older than 7 days in there, kind of clear out your backlog, catch yourself up, so to speak. We're going to copy and paste this one. And if it's not, resolve it now. 2 minutes versus 2 hours, right? So the whole point here is that most of these tasks can take you, I'm just going to add another row there. Most of these tasks, if you don't catch them or if you don't nip them in the bud, so to speak, will take you an extra 2 hours to go back and recontextualize yourself and understand where that mismatch is coming from, right? So it's a lot easier in the moment if you're, cognizant of the process. You're going through every single Monday, do a little bit of cleanup, make sure that you go through and resolve those small problems as you're, starting your week. It again, you have that context, you have that understanding in that moment rather than having to go back and figure out why a number doesn't match up, right? It just makes more work for you and takes a lot longer in the long run. So the final part of the checklist is verify, refund, flow through. And this sort of closes that loop that we talked about with refunds, right? So if it's correct, what it should look like is returns are restocked and COGS reversed, right? Because that's the second part of that equation is that the COGS needs to be reversed so that you're not understating and overstating. So understating your margin, overstating your COGS. If it's not, and I keep copying the wrong module here, if it's not, post the adjustment now. Seems really simple, but it's just it's really easy to get caught in the day to day, right? Especially if you are a fast paced accounting team or bookkeeping team. If you're doing it yourself as the owner, especially, right? It's easy to just say I'll get to it at the end of the month. That's this dedicated time I have to reconciliation. Makes sense to do it all there, and that might make sense, but that dedicated time that you have for reconciliation gets made a lot easier if you take that 5 minutes at the beginning of the week on Monday to go through and do all of these sort of little cleanup tasks. Because again, they compound just like all these other things, all these fees, all these, settlement reports are going to keep piling up. And if you have 1 month where maybe you don't make it in time and you're already behind, it's going to take you even longer. So pretty quick, easy checklist to understand if you're or to set yourself up for success at the beginning of the week, right? So I'm just going to call this the weekly 5 minute check. And just to drive it home, I'm going to add a stamp here. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. I think that illustrates the point pretty clearly, right? So yeah, that's the first, I guess, step to making sure that you're set up for success. Again, very simple, very straightforward, but it is a great tactic nonetheless, right? So it's the highest leverage thing that I can teach you really today is that it's 5 minutes every single morning, three checks, match deposits to settlements, clear unmatched transactions, and verify your flow through. If you do it every week, you're eliminating 80% of the surprises that most people run into, and it's really that simple. They don't disappear. The problems kind of stay there. They get caught, and when you're 5 days out instead of 30 days out, a 5 day problem only takes 2 minutes. A 30-day problem can take you again that 2 hours if you're going back and sort of diving into things that you've already should have been looking into and fixing it at the time. Um, so the next, I guess, or back half of this is your end of month close checklist. Because I think it's important to have a checklist for yourself to understand what the process should be for your month close. And I think that's what everybody's looking for is to have something that they can fall back on that just, ticks all the right boxes for them so they know that they're not missing everything or letting things fall through the cracks. So we'll move down to zone C. And zone C is, like I said, it's going to be the monthly close checklist. Pretty easy, pretty straightforward. Um, and it's, again, this is rather than the three-step checklist, this is going to be just 5 steps. But it's 5 steps that should take you 30 minutes total max at the end of the month. And keep the period as easy as possible for you to reconcile. So the final weekly check, if you've been doing the 5 minute month or 5 minute Monday check each week, is just the last thing to do, right? It's the last day. It should take not very long. Again, 30 minutes. So step one is going to be this final weekly check. Step one, final weekly check. Okay. And the final weekly check should consist of complete weekly check through last day of the month, easy, and clear all remaining unmatched transactions. So this is really just a continuation of the 3 step month or Monday check, right? So you're just doing everything that you've been doing every single week, but now instead of just clearing anything that's the last 7 days, you're just going to clear anything that's left. And it could be, that's the same in the last 7 days. Could just be the last couple days because you didn't get any mismatched transactions, but it's really just going back and making sure that everything is clean. So we're going to color code these, make it super fancy. Step two is going to be reconcile bank plus credit cards. We'll give this a nice orange color here. All right, and first step is going to be match QuickBooks balances to bank statements and reconcile every account, every credit card. Pretty simple, right? So that's just the next step in the evolution. The third step is going to be verify revenue and fees. We'll color code this purple. And this is going to be, does gross revenue equal total settlements? Pretty easy question to ask yourself. And are fees broken out by type? Why that's relevant, again, as we talked about, making sure that when you do pull fees in, that they're segmented and sort of organized in their own special place, so that you know exactly where fees should route, how much money you're losing in certain areas, how much money you're, making back from marketplaces. It just gives you a good understanding of how things are running on top of, making that reconciliation easier because it's got its own bucket, right? You don't have to go digging for lost fees when you know that all of your payment gateway fees should go to a payment gateway clearing account, or all of your Amazon return fees or stocking fees or warehouse fees all route to their own, as you guessed it, specific bucket, right? The fourth step here, and again, this is only 5 steps, so not much left, is going to be inventory snapshot. And we'll give this a nice green. Copy and paste here, and I might condense these just to give myself a little bit more room. Move everything up a little bit. Okay, and for step 4, we're looking at running inventory valuation summary in QuickBooks, and then compare to channel counts. And just look at your top 10 SKUs. You don't have to do it for every single SKU if you have a ton, but looking at your top SKUs will give you, the most bang for your buck. If you don't have that many SKUs, it makes sense to go through and just kind of give it a once over and make sure everything looks good. But this gives you that visual check to make sure that you feel confident and that you know that everything is in line. There are tools that'll do this for you essentially and make sure that everything is in sync, but it's still good to do that visual check because, as I always say, reconciliation, as automated as it can get, and Webgility kind of wades into this water pretty frequently, in that people think, Webgility carries your financial data from your stores or your sales channels into QuickBooks, so it should reconcile for me, right? I don't have to go in and check anything, which will get you to the point where you're crossing the finish line, but reconciliation should always be, at the very end of the day, a human process where somebody goes and gives it the rubber stamp, right? Because ultimately that's the last line of defense for auditing and making sure that you have accurate financial data. So in our humble opinion, reconciliation should never be fully automated, but it should have a lot of that segmentation built in the automation to make things easier for you. You just go in and dot your I's and cross your T's essentially, right? So the final step in this checklist is going to be your P&L, and I'd say that's the most important, and your balance sheet review. Okay, and we're just gonna give this, let's highlight it and give it a nice gray. Okay, and the steps here are compare your P&L, oops, to the last month, and confirm inventory, balance sheet inventory, and that it matches valuation report. Okay, so while these tasks do add up, it's a bunch of little tasks. They should not take you all that much time. We're looking at, and I'll give some estimates for time here. So this should be like 5 minutes. We'll give this its own color here. Let's just make it gray. Okay, and that's 5 minutes. The reconciliation should take between like 8 and 10 minutes. We'll call it 8 minutes. Step 3 should take you maybe like, again, 7 to 10. Call it 7. Same thing for the inventory. Well, this one might not take that long. So 5 minutes. And then your final P&L review should take another 5 minutes, right? So what we're looking at here is, again, like 30 minutes of time. So 30 minutes total at the end of the month, and then 5 minutes at the beginning of each week. Saves you a lot of time, right? That's the end goal here, is to give you as much time in your day as possible. Again, because if you have more time to do things that actually matter, and you're spending less time on the menial work, you can make better decisions, and spend time on the things that are important to your business rather than be sort of being stuck in the trenches in the day to day, right? So the last thing I wanted to go through is the ripple effect, and it's sort of like the cause and effect, or understanding what a slow close looks like compared to a fast close. So we'll start off with a slow close, and we'll make it red. And the slow close is going to look like this. Your daily decisions. So if you're If you're reconciling and it takes you 10 days, it's based on February's data, which is 4 to 5 weeks old, right? So if you're reconciling, and I'll just to make this a little clearer, 5 to 10 days. So if your reconciling takes 5 to 10 days, you're working on old data, right? It's 4 to 5 weeks old. Not great. We'll make this bulleted. Inventory reorders. 6 week old COGS data. You might over order or under order, right? So if you're working off old data specifically for your inventory, you're going to probably either over or under order because you don't know exactly what you should be looking at in terms of restocking. Your channel decisions. Amazon feels profitable, so you're maybe not sure that Amazon is actually profitable because you're working off of no data, gut decisions. And that's one thing that we talk a lot about in this whiteboard series, I'll call it, is that if you're not working off of a clear financial, roadmap or paper trail, you're making gut decisions. And gut decisions can be good. They can work out for you, but nobody likes the guesswork. Everybody wants to have confidence and understanding in their own data and feel confident in the decisions they make. Um, Pricing is based on estimated margins, right? Not in reality. And then finally, tax prep. And this is very poignant if you're still in that category of business that is approaching the deadline on the 15th. So you're going to scramble in Q4, 40 plus hours of catch up, and then extra CPA fees. So all that stuff adds up. And that's what you're looking at on the 5 to 10 day slow close. And that's, I would say, at minimum, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to run into all of those, but generally that's sort of what you're looking at. So the fast close should be, again, same day, 30 minutes to an hour at max. Make it green so we know it's good. Copy and paste. And your reconciliation looks at April 1st based on March data, and it's current within 24 hours, right? So your daily decisions, are going to be up to date. Your inventory reorders are going to be based on current COGS, right-sized orders. You're not going to be over or under ordering if you know exactly the amount that you need to order in that moment. Your Amazon take rate is, 31%. You might know for sure. Shopify is 3%. So okay, well, if I'm losing a lot of money in Shopify or on Amazon, the take rate's 31%. They're taking 31% of my revenue. It might be time to reevaluate if it's something worth investing in if you're not making a whole lot back on that investment, right? So giving you the information on what's profitable and what's not from a channel perspective is invaluable, right? Um, so your pricing is based on confirmed margins rather than a gut feel. And then your monthly data is already clean. CPA gets clean books. Might be some fees here and there, but it's not as drastic as having to have a CPA go and clean things up after the fact, right? Or having yourself needing to go clean this up. So pretty stark difference, right? You're making decisions based off of as current of information as possible. And that's the biggest take home that I want to kind of drive home today is the ripple effect. Is that if you're doing a slow close, it might not be the end of the world for you. You might, manage as a business every single month doing that, but by sort of employing these very, very simple things, this like super straightforward framework, 3 things at the beginning of your Monday, and then 5 steps at the end of your month for 30 minutes, saves you a lot of time in the long run. Sort of like making your bed or, doing the dishes as you finish cooking. I've heard that's something that people recommend to do as well. I'm gonna say I don't take my own advice there. I let dishes pile up sometimes. But um, the last thing that I want to cover here is going to be just a score yourself, right? So if you're watching this back, if you're here right now, this is a good way to understand where you feel you are at in this sort of ecosystem. So with a I'll just do a little scorecard here. We'll call it weekly 5 minute check. Bank CC reconciliation. Oops, revenue fee verification and inventory reconciliation. Okay, and then I'm gonna give it boom 1, 2, 3, 4, and just go down the line here. And as always, I'm going to send this whiteboard out. I'm going to send the slide deck that comes with it out, as well as some additional resources, another checklist that you can use today to kind of help work through your reconciliation process, and then an AI prompt so you can get more out of your own data if you'd like to feed your data into whatever AI program that you currently use. Generally, Claude is like a really good, acceptable, professional one to be using currently. Anthropic's Claude or ChatGPT obviously is the most popular among the general populace. And then I'll just say your total. So this is kind of like a worksheet that you can do yourself through the whiteboard. But if you scored below a 3 on any of them, the next week, so next Monday, is when you grow without the system. Um, Revenue goes up, close gets harder, and profit doesn't follow, right? So what you want to do is start to use this checklist and see yourself in that that 4 on every single checklist to know that you're on the right track. So I will, like I said, I will send this whiteboard out. I'll kind of clean it up to just to make sure it's as digestible as possible. Like I said, these can kind of get unruly if you haven't been looking at it for the entire 30 minutes as I've been creating it. But I'll also send the slide deck out. You'll get the full recording of this session so that you can listen to my beautiful voice as you do the worksheet. You'll get the worksheet, you'll get the AI prompt, and then you'll get a whole list of additional resources that I've included for more learning if you want to see like peer-reviewed industry expert opinion on these things and how you can get the most out of your close every single month. That will be there as well. So I generally try to get that done same day. You might see it tomorrow. But either way, you should see another invite for next week's session. We added the ability for when you sign up on the landing page, you can register for all sessions. So if you didn't want to have to check back every single week and you just want to get the invite directly into your email, just hit that little checkbox under the registration to sign up for all future events. We are sort of transitioning this in the future for the rest of Q2 to be more of a clinic style webinar. So less whiteboard centric. There will still be whiteboards. There will still be, engaging visuals. But the goal here is to give it more of a diagnostic feel so that we explore the problems that you face day in, day out, the things that you maybe don't even know exist as problems, and how to solve them and make things easier for yourself as a business owner or an operator or whatever your capacity in the business is, make things easier for you. So I appreciate everybody joining today. If I could leave you for or with a couple extra things, I will include a link for our profit leak detector. If you're not familiar with Webgility, it can show you exactly where you might be leaking profit on in your e-commerce stack and how Webgility can help with that. I'll also include our return on investment or ROI calculator, so that gives you even more foundational reality on how Webgility can help. And then if you're a Webgility customer, don't forget that we have customer webinars every single or every other week on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. Next week is the next one. And then these whiteboard sessions happen every single week on Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern. So I appreciate everybody joining, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach me directly at john.may@webgility.com, or reach out to our team here at Webgility, and we are more than happy to answer any questions you have on e-commerce accounting and kind of streamlining your operations. So I appreciate you, and again, enjoy the rest of your week.